Welcome to Zero Knowledge. I'm your host, Anna Rose. In this podcast, we will be exploring the latest in zero-knowledge research and the decentralized web, as well as new paradigms that promise to change the way we interact and transact online. This week, Tarun and I chat with Hart from UMA and Across. And just to note, this episode basically has two parts. For the first half of the episode, we explore Hart's project Across, a cross-chain interoperability solution, aka a bridge, and a sister project to UMA. We explore how Across is constructed, how the different actors function in the system, the trade-off space, the choices they make, and how Across compares to other interop solutions. Then, as we are in Brussels, in person recording this, we pop a bottle of champagne and very much shift gears. So it is becoming a bit of an every 6 months or so tradition for Tarun and I to grab a bottle of bubbly and a friend for a candid drunk episode. This time, Hart is that friend. And we begin with thoughtful observations about our week in Brussels during ECC, events we've been at, talks we've given, research that's coming. But very quickly, we devolve into somewhat drunken ramblings and interrupting one another a lot. Classic. Please forgive us all. We were drinking on an empty stomach. Hope you enjoy it. Before we kick off, I want to let you know about ZK Hack Montreal, an IRL hackathon happening on August 9th to 11th in, you guessed it, Montreal. This is the fourth ZK-focused hackathon produced by ZK Hack, and it's a great place to learn about ZK tools, meet fellow ZK builders, and build the next generation of ZK applications. You can already apply over at zkmontreal.com. It's set to be the ZK event of the summer, and it's heating up, so get your application in soon. Now, Tanya will share a little bit about this week's sponsors.
Namada is the shielded asset hub rewarding you to protect the multi-chain. Built to give you full control over sharing your personal information, Namada brings data protection to existing assets, applications, and networks. Namada ends the era of transparency by default, enabling shielded transfers and shielded cross-chain actions to protect your data even when interacting with transparent chains. Namada also introduces a novel shielding rewards system. By holding your assets in a shielded set, you help strengthen Namada's data protection guarantees and collect NAM rewards in return. Namada will initially support IBC and Ethereum-based assets, but will ultimately serve as a single shielded hub for all assets across the multi-chain. Learn more and follow Namada mainnet launch at namada.net. Aleo is a new Layer 1 blockchain that achieves the programmability of Ethereum, the privacy of Zcash, and the scalability of a rollup. Driven by a mission for a truly secure internet, Aleo has interwoven zero-knowledge proofs into every facet of their stack, resulting in a vertically integrated Layer 1 blockchain that's unparalleled in its approach. Aleo is ZK by design. Dive into their programming language Leo and see what permissionless development looks like, offering boundless opportunities for developers and innovators to build ZK apps. This is an invitation to be part of a transformational ZK journey. Dive deeper and discover more about Aleo at aleo.org. And now, here's our episode.
So I'm here in Brussels, our favorite city in the world, with Tarun and Hart. Hi, guys.
Hey, Anna.
Hey, excited to be here. And for the record, even though I'm going to get impaled by our pair of Canadians on the show, Belgium really is France's Canada.
Ooh.
I thought you were going to save this joke for like later in the pod.
It's okay. We might as well pull the knives out. It'll get spicier faster.
So for context, Anna and I are both proud Canadians.
Yes.
And I don't think we take kindly to Belgium or Canada being compared to, what's the joke?
Belgium is France's
Canada.
Belgium is France's Canada. Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Also, Canada's so much bigger
And
than
wonderful.
America. And Brussels is so much smaller than France.
True.
It doesn't make any sense, actually.
Tarun, I came here from a beach in Canada on the West Coast where I saw humpback whales flowing through our gorgeous oceans on my way here. Belgium doesn't have that shit.
No.
All right. Well, you know, I'm just the messenger, but then I just heard this joke so many times.
And he thought it was really, really funny. This is the
know.
second time we're hearing it. Anyway, for today's episode, the plan is we're going to try to do this in two parts. The first part is actually getting to know Hart and getting to know the project Across. And Hart, I've tried to have you on the show, I think now for a few months. And it's just cool that we're in the same city. And so we figured we'd actually sit down and do this interview now. The second part, maybe we can do a little review of what's been happening this week in Brussels, because we're here for the big ETHCC extravaganza that happens every year. But this year, it's here in Brussels, which is kind of unusual.
I ate 0 sprouts so far.
Is sprouts a thing? I thought
Well,
waffles.
they're Brussels sprouts.
Oh, yeah.
It's your dad jokes, man. What is going on?
No sugar-free Red Bull here. It's been impossible to find.
Oh, no, this is what happens. He gets so sweet.
True, and there's an
And
unlimited
dorky.
supply of sugar-free Red Bull in my hotel. I'll
I'll take you up on it.
Nice.
Because I kept finding Red Bull Zero, which is a poor imitation of sugar-free Red Bull.
Really?
Yeah, I think sugar-free has this particular anisey like aftertaste that I like.
You feel so unfocused because I think you haven't had enough sugar-free Red Bull.
It's true. It's truly a drug.
All right. Hart, I think we're going to start in on a little bit of an intro to you. The audience may not know you. What have you been working on for the last few years?
Yeah, actually, I know Tarun from before Gauntlet actually started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What year?
I guess this was 2018, Tarun?
2018, yeah.
Yeah. We paid you as a contractor at one
Yeah.
point. Do you remember that?
I remember in 2 Sigma office.
Yeah, in the 2 Sigma office, which is one of our investors. Anyways, this was back when I found it. So, okay, I joke that I'm the second oldest guy in DeFi after Chris Dixon. Tarun's scratching his head.
Yeah, it's
Thinking about it.
It's probably Igorov's kind of old.
Huh?
Igorov is old.
I don't know him.
I think Igorov is actually probably might be older than both of you.
Anyways.
He finished his PhD in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Anna, I worked in finance.
Yeah.
As a young Canadian, I went to university in the U.S. in New York, then worked in finance for 8 years as a bond trader, where I met my co-founder of UMA. We went to MIT and knew friends of Tarun. That's kind of how we originally got connected. I started a fintech business. That was from 2013 to 2017, and then got sucked into crypto in 2018.
Okay.
Before DeFi was a thing, and made a protocol called UMA. The goal there is to we were trying to bring derivatives onto blockchains.
Okay.
And our problem there was how do we get data? And we meant more than just price data, but arbitrary data on blockchains. And we built something called the Optimistic Oracle. And that's been really cool and really fun. But the thing I think we're going to talk about today is the second protocol, our sister protocol we created called Across, which has really morphed into an intent-based interop tech, mainly thought of as a bridge.
Yeah.
And maybe we can talk about why bridging isn't a thing too. But
Sounds good.
Yeah.
But before we do that, UMA, that project, where was it? What ecosystem is that in? Where did it live?
all Ethereum. So
Oh, it's all Ethereum.
Yeah,
For
it's
some
all
reason, I
Ethereum.
thought it was Cosmos, but it's not.
no, I like
Okay.
Cosmos, but we're not on Cosmos.
Okay.
It's actually quite possible that if Tendermint existed,
Canadians are too nice to be founders in the Cosmos ecosystem. Just as
Wait, there are a ton of Canadians in the Cosmos ecosystem, actually.
well, do they fight as much?
No, but I think everything was founded for Cosmos in Toronto.
Okay,
I think Jay
fine,
and
fine.
Ethan, and I think
That's
they're all
true, that's
from
true,
there.
That's true.
Henry.
I'm just thinking about all the people who fight with each other in Cosmos. I'm like, the stereotype is you guys
Yeah.
are really nice.
Guys, Canada's a country. It's a big country, and people are people. They're nice Canadians, and there's a lot of assholes.
also
They just hide it better.
it's true, and I've spent enough time in both the U.S. and in crypto to become less nice. That's been my goal.
But,
All right,
but
you
you're
heard
still
it
pretty
here
nice.
first.
Okay, so UMA was an Ethereum project.
Yeah.
Was it an application on Ethereum?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
So UMA you can think of as an implementation of Vitalik's SchellingCoin blog post that he wrote in 2014. And this has other intellectual predecessors in Truthcoin and Augur, actually.
Oh, wow.
And the idea is how can you build a game theoretic machine that will tell you a truth, really.
Oracles.
An oracle.
Yeah.
But not like a price feed oracle, not like we're going to take the API data from Binance and Coinbase and put it on chain. This is I want to ask a question like, who's the president of the United States? Or an arbitrary question like, is this set of data valid? And the origin story here for Across actually was we were actually looking for use cases for UMA. And this was sort of before any type of cross-chain messaging existed. And we realized that transacting across chains or sort of verifying things across chains is a form of an Oracle problem. And we realized we could use the UMA Oracle to help with that, which we then do in a very specific way that we can maybe get into.
I want to just check this though, because like you were saying sort of it was the first message passing, but like had IBC been spec'd out? Or are you thinking more like in the Ethereum
In the Ethereum
side?
world.
Okay.
We're talking more like Arbitrum and Optimism sort of had just launched, and they had a way to send messages. They still do. The canonical message bridges go from Ethereum to those chains in like 20-ish minutes, but take 7 days to go the other direction, even though everyone can kind of see that they're correct before that 7-day finality.
Okay.
And so we were trying to use this UMA SchellingCoin Oracle to do messaging faster.
So you build across for that particular use case. And what is it exactly? Like you're talking about this message passing bridge, but yeah, maybe can you go in a little bit of like what that looks like? Or maybe what it was and also how it's evolved?
Yeah, the origin story might actually confuse what it's become now.
Okay.
So across is an intent-based bridge.
Now.
And so the way I like to explain this is if you think that you have, imagine you have two blockchains, and we have no video, so I can't use my hands, but you have blockchain A and blockchain B, and you want to send value between the two of them. What naively, the way you think that would work is, okay, I'm going to have blockchain A, I'm going to send a message or send a deposit into blockchain A. I have to wait for finality on blockchain A, and then I send a message from A to B, and then I release funds on B to the user.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. So that's like typically how what I'll call like Gen 1 bridges work.
Was this the lock unlock?
Yeah. Then you can get
like,
into, there's sort of a different parallel conversation of like, okay, am I locking and minting assets?
Oh, yes.
Right. Or you could imagine you have a pool of assets on chain A and chain B, and you're going to use this message to release assets that are like canonical assets on chain B. Kind of ignore that for now. That's sort of like depending on your use case. But this sort of bridging framework is how I think a lot of people thought that value should be moved between blockchains.
For sure.
And in something like IBC, actually, this kind of works pretty well because you have pretty fast finality and you can send the message pretty quickly, and that all kind of works, right? But for a lot of EVM rollups, that's not the case, and it becomes quite tricky.
Got it.
So you go back and you think about this native framework or this naive framework of trying to send a message from A to B and wait for finality on A to do so. And the problem is it's slow. Like you have to wait for finality, and then sending a message is expensive and slow and kind of scary from a security perspective too. And so our approach is actually to do something quite different. And this is the nature of these cross-chain intents. Our approach is to not send a message, but to rather have a network of third-party solvers or relayers or fillers, use the words interchangeably. And those third-party solvers will observe blockchain A for when a user makes a deposit, and that deposit goes basically into an escrow contract. They'll observe blockchain A, and then they will front money to blockchain B, front their own capital to blockchain B, and fill the user extremely quickly. The user's happy, they get their funds fast, and then the protocol can take its time in verifying, quote unquote, that intent was filled before releasing the user's initial funds to the solver.
I want to really understand what these third-party solvers actually are. Like, are they actors on one blockchain, one of these two places, or are they like really sitting outside of the entire system?
So they're kind of actors on every blockchain that they fill transactions on.
Okay.
So you can think, let's make Tarun be the third-party solver here. And so, Anna, you want to bridge from, I'll make it Arbitrum to base. So it's A to B, right? So Anna's bridging from Arbitrum to base. Anna does a deposit transaction on Arbitrum of, say, 1 ETH. Tarun is the off-chain actor that observes that. So he can see you did that deposit on Arbitrum. If he trusts the Arbitrum sequencer, which he does, he can say, okay, Anna's definitely done this deposit on the Arbitrum sequencer. I am going to go and fill Anna out of my own inventory on blockchain B on base.
Yeah.
And he can do that extremely quickly. Like our median fill time is 4 seconds. depending on the chain, it's down to like less than a second on some of these fills. And so he does that for a small fee. And the fees here are really small, which we can also get into too. But he does that and he makes this loan to you on blockchain B. And then the protocol verifies that this fill happened and pays him back later.
So is it that 7-day kind of like fraud proof, or is this like a different kind of settlement?
Yeah, so it's not the 7. So the protocol, like from the Across perspective, all Across has to do is get comfortable enough or be sure that the intent was filled, which we can talk about how we do that. But then they can immediately release funds to Tarun on the origin chain. We can send a message to Arbitrum in this case and say release funds to Tarun. We do a bunch of like optimizations to help Tarun manage its inventory. He can actually request the protocol pays him back on base because that's where he lent his funds.
Okay. But
this is sort of like an optimization to help Tarun, the third-party actor, with his inventory management. And yeah, we're not waiting for this 7-day finality period. We're sort of this fast fill layer on top of the L2 and like EVM ecosystem.
The thing I still don't get though is how does a solver see both of these things? Like I've always had this impression that like if you're working in one blockchain, it can't really see into another blockchain. It doesn't know the state of the other space. And I know you said, so this solver will be on both of these chains, but still like, where's the information being connected and how is it being connected?
It's a really good question and insight. So blockchain B base cannot see what's happening on blockchain A.
Yeah.
But Tarun's not on A or B. Tarun is his own independent special person. And so Tarun, he's not making a decision on behalf of like a protocol or consensus mechanism. He's making a decision on behalf of his own money.
Okay.
So all he cares about is, does Tarun think that deposit transaction on A happened? If he believes it happened, then he can go and make the fill on blockchain B with his own money. And so basically by introducing these independent third parties that are observing and making their own judgments on like what happened between blockchains, we can shortcut all of these like messaging latency problems. Does that make sense?
I think so. I still don't I think this makes me want to dig into who the third party solvers actually are.
Well, one important thing to think about is that when you rely on like solvers, you can lose liveness, right? Like in theory, all the solvers could not want to hold the risk because they don't want to hold a risky asset and then no one fulfills, right? That's a little different than a blockchain where like a layer one where someone can always step in and sort of costless or low costly earn part of the network for participating. Here you're earning fees, but you have to stay live and stay. So it's a little more like market making.
That's what it sounds like actually. And that's why when you're talking about these solvers, I'm really curious like what form they take. Are they a company? Are they like a market maker that's like just using a software that you've provided, but like has already checked, like I trust all these things and it's sort of like happening in the background?
Yeah, so people actually think Across is either us running our own solver,
okay, or Okay.
And neither of those are true. Like we do run a solver much in the same way. If you think of like Aave or Compound, they, at least early days, they ran a liquidation bot to execute liquidations on their protocol. We kind of do the same thing, but most of our transactions, like 80% of them or more, are filled by third parties.
Okay. And
these third parties, it's actually kind of quite cool. They're grassroots folks that are like, we know them by Discord handles or we don't know who some of them are. And Across has written a reference implementation of how to be, we use the term relayer in our system, of how to be a relayer in Across. And other people have taken that and heavily optimized it. So they like outcompete our reference implementation by a lot. And we really don't really know who these folks are. It's permissionless.
Can they cheat?
No.
How do you make sure they don't cheat?
So
They have to lock their funds or something? Is that why?
So we'll step through it. So you doing your transaction on Arbitrum, you deposit 1 ETH on Arbitrum with instructions that say, and this is your intent. We'll go back to this intent concept. So you deposit 1 ETH on Arbitrum with your instructions that you want to have 1 ETH on base less a small fee. Let's say the fee is like, I don't know, $1. That's your instructions. Mm-hmm. Any one of these relayers can observe that deposit transaction. And those funds go into an escrow contract, into like the Across Protocol escrow contract, which I generally call like our settlement layer. You used the word settlement earlier, and like I think it's very appropriate here. Okay, so that happens. And then we have Tarun as one of the solvers. He goes and he fills you on base. Mm-hmm. His fill transaction goes through a contract that basically nonces it, that makes sure you can't get double filled.
Okay.
And he records that says, okay, Anna on Arbitrum said she wanted 1 ETH sent to her on base less this small fee. And he fronts you money. The protocol then like verifies that happened,
I see.
but won't pay Tarun back if he screwed up.
Okay.
So like Tarun has a huge incentive to, because he paid an ETH out for this fee, he has a huge incentive to not get it wrong. Mm-hmm. If he gets it wrong, he doesn't get paid back your 1 ETH on Arbitrum. And you might get like double filled by somebody that does it right, and you'd be happy because you get twice the money.
But he doesn't get slashed or anything. There's no like punishment. It's just he's already handed it over.
Exactly. He fronts money. So there's like the slashing is sort of built in, if you will, where if he did it wrong, he doesn't get paid back the money he fronted.
And it's like the overall protocol that's verifying. It's not this like reference implementation.
Correct.
Okay. Because the minute you said that, this reference implementation that people have optimized it, I start to think like if they dramatically changed it, couldn't they like...
Well, they still have to follow the rules of the smart contract, right? Like how they come to the inputs that they send on chain is up to them, right? And that the reference implementation basically computes inputs given some state of the world. You could write something that maybe takes other inputs, like you take in Binance data and you compare prices and you lower your fee because you're using some off-chain data. But that's all you doing it yourself. But all you're doing is really constructing inputs that go to a public smart contract, and you can only kind of take your money out if some covenants the contract holds are true, and that's secured by the validators.
Wait, there are validators?
He means validators on
validators of Ethereum, like the
the Ethereum validators. Okay. Talk a little bit about that protocol then, the one that's doing the verifying. What have you had to do to make that happen? Is that just like a series of smart contracts? Is that like, is it run from a central point? Is there a validator set there?
Yeah. Okay. So conceptually what we're trying to do is verify that Tarun's fill. So we go back to our example, right? You were filled by Tarun. You're happy. You as the user move on with your day, and like you got filled in a few seconds and you don't have to think about it again. So that's great. Now Tarun needs to get paid back. So what we conceptually need to do is just verify that Tarun's fill was in fact valid before we release the funds you deposited on Arbitrum on the origin chain back to him. So the kind of naive way you would do this is you would like send a message from base back to Arbitrum and say, yes, this fill did happen, and release the funds that way. But then we kind of go back and like, well, we're just sending messages again. Like it's not, it's faster, but there's just as much overhead. So what we do is we actually batch together thousands of fills every period. Periods right now are about an hour. So over the course of an hour, and this could be changed as a parameter in the system, but over the course of an hour, we batch together all of the fills off chain. So a bundle of fills is constructed, and anyone can construct this bundle of fills because you can observe all of these blockchains, right? And that bundle is then proposed optimistically. This is now using the UMA oracle, back to what we talked about at the beginning. It's proposed optimistically to Ethereum mainnet, and anyone can then dispute it and say, actually, I disagree with this construction of fills.
And is this like, is there a fraud proof in here somehow? Or is this just like, is there a time frame?
There's an roughly hour long challenge window.
Okay.
So
it's very short.
It's quite short. But again, this is deterministically verifiable. And we have people that run dispute bots to verify this. Anyone can kind of run infrastructure to reconstruct these bundles and verify it. And then provided that the bundle is this sort of bundle of repayment instructions is not challenged, it then gets processed as kind of this batch repayment to all the solvers over that period.
And is this why you were saying before that you could actually repay it over on base or something like, because it's batched, because there's like, action happening in all directions, that like you could just say, well, somebody was sending it this way, somebody was sending it that way. Instead of doing those two, we'll just cross them out and you can actually receive it on the one you sent it on.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead, and this is like, no, it's really smart. It's like this other optimization in the system where basically like you can kind of think left hand, right hand. Like if you, Anna, were going from Arbitrum to base and I was going from base to Arbitrum, right? Well, if Tarun filled you on base and then filled me on Arbitrum and then kind of like just has funds all over, like you can kind of net these off. And so the cross protocol has people that provide liquidity. So we do have like LPs in the protocol, and that liquidity is used so that if Tarun wanted to, he could ask for his repayment to happen on the destination chain. And we kind of do some netting and some sort of financial optimizations to minimize the amount of money that actually has to get bridged between blockchains. Basically with the understanding that if you have offsetting flow, like you don't need to send funds between Arbitrum and base. You just have offsetting flow and kind of net users out.
And the reason you would do that is because of, I guess, like when you're sending money back and forth, if you actually do it, if you actually have to do those settlements, are you saving money? Are you saving, like what would you do otherwise? You'd be like, would you actually be moving the funds off the L2 onto the L1 and then back on the other L2? Or is it even just calculating the repayments on each side would just be annoying? Like what are you saving?
All the above, right?
Okay.
Like the dumbest way you would do this is Tarun has filled the user on base. He gets paid back, or the protocol releases the funds on Arbitrum, bridges them over the 7-day slow bridge back to Ethereum.
Okay.
Right. And then uses the faster Ethereum to base bridge that's like 20 minutes. And so Tarun gets repaid in 7 days and 20 minutes type thing.
Yeah.
And obviously like that doesn't make sense. So when you have this type of netting or these other advantages, you could first of all repay Tarun on Arbitrum itself, and then Tarun has this like cross-chain position where he's short on base, long on Arbitrum. Or you could do other kind of inventory management type tools to say, okay, maybe we have LP funds in a cross, which we talked about what cross does. Maybe the cross protocol has some funds, some sort of, I use the concept of like working capital. There's some like working capital in the protocol that could pay Tarun back on base. Or maybe Tarun is like a sophisticated solver that has his own inventory management going on, and he's just doing sort of his own netting left hand, right hand, where he's doing fills from Arbitrum to base and getting paid back on Arbitrum while making fills on base, but then he's got other fills going the other direction, and he just does his own netting. Anyways, all of these systems sort of work and are possible.
But those are the less, like the optimized one is what you're actually providing.
Yeah, and I think it's, one of the things I've actually thought is very cool and kind of been exciting about Across is the architecture itself really hasn't changed in almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
It's just had all of these improvements and optimizations made to it, really in terms of how we net flows and how solvers and these third parties operate and how they do their own inventory management.
I think for the user, I think it's actually quite intuitive what Across does, but maybe given that Across was created to, in some ways, dog food the UMA protocol, or be your own customer of your own protocol. Maybe it'd be good to talk about where you use, what parts of building one protocol first and building another one aside it, how that influenced your design choices, and the fact that you have had the architecture frozen maybe is one of them.
There's actually probably a bunch to respond to there. So first off, our team does have like a financial engineering background. And generally speaking, I thought that was useful, or has been useful for us to come up with this whole intent framework in the first place. So it's almost like if you think from a very engineering first or kind of computer sciencey first perspective, you think of the idea of, oh, I need to send a message to be able to bridge funds. And it's a little bit more of a foreign concept to say, wait, let's have a third party make this loan. That was kind of useful for our own financial engineering background. Then all the other things we've learned from building UMA is, first of all, build something that has actual demand and traction. And so in this case, another learning is there is no demand to send messages between blockchains except to move value, right? Mm-hmm. And this is one of those, this I think is a spicy take. Like, all of these arbitrary messaging protocols, they don't get used for anything other than moving value.
Really?
Yeah. It's like 95% of the use case here of moving between blockchains is moving value.
It's good. The next question is going to be comparing across other protocols.
Although, wait, I had one question before that, which is actually about fees, but maybe that could tie into comparing them.
Well, we can get more spicy takes on fees there too, because I actually think the economics of sending messages aren't particularly good. The economics of moving value are much better, which we can get to as well. But there's another really important insight here too that I actually tried to hammer in my presentation at ECC as well, which the fact that 95% of the use cases are moving value between blockchains does let you take advantage of the fungibility of money. And so if you are moving value, you don't care whose money it is that gets there. This is where the third party solver works well. So like Tarun, if Anna, if you're trying to move money from Arbitrum to Base and you get filled by Tarun, you don't care that it wasn't your money on Arbitrum. It's just money, right? Yeah. And so that fungibility of value is what lets us like shortcut a lot of the latency issues around messaging by, again, having these third parties do that. And then Tarun, the solver, gets paid back by other money somewhere, and it's all fungible. So the point that I tried to make at my presentation at the conference, it's people have traditionally thought about interop as equivalent to TCP IP. We want to like connect servers with like network pipes and send messages between them. When I think in the blockchain concept, that's not true. The thing that we're moving is value. And so you're moving money around and you have access to like different ways of doing that that actually shortcut many of the problems with the hurdles and trade-offs that you face in arbitrary messaging.
Would that also be like in even the software development itself and maintenance, kind of like there's always sort of a way to fund this kind of work? Like that thing you just described, like with the relayer or the solver, like they're all of a sudden incentivized because they can get a fee. Whereas if it was just info, you're sort of relying on these like altruistic relayers of info.
Okay, you want to be funny. It's almost like arbitrary messaging is like communist and what we're building is like capitalist. Or
the messages is like the roads. It's like city infrastructure, which doesn't make any money. That's
a better analogy. It's public good-ish, right? So we do have to have these roads between blockchains, but they kind of get built and they have limitations and I actually like this analogy a lot. And I'll extend it into like native interop and where this is going for a split second, and we'll get back on topic.
Is the base layer the sewer system in this analogy?
Ouch.
But so we have this intent-based protocol that incentivizes off-chain actors to compete to fill users as quickly or cheaply or both as possible. That seems good. That just seems strictly good. And as they get more competitive, users, like the protocol gets better. Users get better fills, which is really cool. The messaging we have to do to verify those fills, you can think of as your roads like analogy here. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool is, like to Tarun's point, we use the UMA system because that was one type of road we could build to send messages between these blockchains. But we're not at all wed to it. And we are, I think it's very possible that we'll move off it, at least in some ways in the near future.
Oh, wow.
And where this gets really interesting is you start thinking about all the native interop systems that like L2 ecosystems are building. So Optimism has a design for native interop for their superchain.
Yep.
And what they're effectively doing with how this affects across is it's like building a better road between those chains. So now we have like a highway that allows for faster messages and more efficient messaging between, let's say, base and optimism here. But the across protocol and the solvers, they can do exactly the same thing they did before. However, now they get repaid faster since there is a better road connecting those routes.
Oh, interesting. And I guess you'd extend that past the OP side. Would this be where like the ag layer,
Exactly.
the hyper, what is it, ZK
Elastic chain.
elastic chain?
Yeah.
There was so much beef on Twitter about that when they
Recently,
launched.
I know.
What, the ag layer versus elastic chain?
Yeah, and like claims over TPS or whatever,
But I
which
guess-
are always gerrymandered anyway.
But
right?
I guess in your case where you're sitting, you're happy if these things exist.
So it's worth zooming out and thinking about this from like Vitalik's perspective. So Vitalik wants a unified Ethereum. And yet you have these ecosystems within Ethereum that are very knife fight-ish right now. So Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Sync, Polygon CDK, and others are all fighting for dominance. And none of them are going to dominate, in my opinion. There is going to be use case for all of them. And like tribalism and token incentives and everything else, right? And I think it's pretty cool from Ethereum's perspective that we have these different ecosystems, but they are all building their own form of like interop, and they're not compatible,
No.
right? And if you take
Not
this intense standard, well, and they're not going to be compatible. I'm pretty confident about that. But if you take this intense standard and you think of it and delete across from this, don't even think about across. Think about this architecture of specifying an intent to go from one chain to another and define it as a very lightweight standard that then allows these solvers to interpret these intent orders and fill users very quickly wherever they want to go. What then happens with all this native interop is if the origin and destination are both within native interop, the solvers just get paid back faster, which makes it cheaper. So this intent standard becomes this simple unifying layer across these native interop systems. And like Tarun, to your point, the like UMA way of sending messages maybe goes away.
I was going to ask you if the UMA way of sending messages goes away because you want to support Solana or other chains.
Well, we can. We
Sorry,
do,
was that spicy?
No, that's not spicy because we really do want to support Solana, and we actually probably are sooner than later. It doesn't. It's actually weirdly compatible with that the way we are because we can use the UMA way of verifying all of these intent fills. We can verify intent fills on Solana too in exactly the same way. The only thing we're missing is a bridge to send occasional messages. We're talking like one message an hour from Ethereum to Solana, but there are people that have built those bridges, so we could use them. Right?
I have two more points I definitely want to cover here.
Okay.
One is I want to go back to fees because one thing I didn't even get from the original example was like, where does the fee actually get paid? Like if going really, really back to like I'm depositing 1 ETH on Arbitrum, but I want to get it on base, aren't I paying the fee on Arbitrum? Like I'm paying the fee. So wouldn't the fee be when I'm like at the site where I pay, or is it like on the other side?
So if we're being precise, if you do an on-chain deposit transaction, you pay that fee for that on-chain deposit transaction. There.
Yeah.
Right. There's a gasless version of this too, where you wouldn't pay that, but let's.
But the
ignore
fee
that.
is for the solver, right? Like
Fee. Well, you pay. You are saying I want to bridge 1 ETH from Arbitrum to base for as little as possible.
Okay.
Basically, and so who do we have to pay along the way? We have to pay the solver for the service they're providing.
and the gas, if
And
there
the
is.
solver then has to pay the gas on the destination chain to send you the message.
Okay.
So they're going to bake that into what they charge. And in our version of some of this more fancy like inventory management, if the solver borrows money from the across liquidity providers, that's kind of this extra convenience function, they pay that fee too. But basically, from the user's perspective, they're just paying a small fee to get funds from A to B. And I'll add 2 points. So this is compatible with the user not just moving value, but they could, first of all, also swap between assets. We don't do this today, but it's not a far stretch. So this could swap from ETH to USDC.
in
And
that bridging. So
in
it'd
that-
like show up on another chain. Okay.
Exactly. And the solver can also execute code on behalf of the user. So they could also say, hey, bridge Anna, your transaction could be bridge 1 ETH from Arbitrum to base and execute this arbitrary code that, for example, buys an NFT, right? So the thing I'm pushing for is for us to adopt a standard for what these intents look like. We've published one that we built with Uniswap. It's called ERC 7683, and it's an open standard that we want people's feedback on. And you can go to erc7683.org and read about it and comment on it. But we want to have an open standard for this intent structure that would unify Ethereum and also allow bridging to Solana and all these other fun things, and just creates this. It sort of emulates this seamless one-chain experience, even though it's powered by solvers under the surface.
Interesting. The last thing about fees is I still don't understand where the solver gets paid.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the solver simply, when you were bridging the 1 ETH from Arbitrum to base, they don't pay you 1 ETH. They pay you 0.999 ETH or whatever
And
their fee is.
they take it on the way.
And then, so they pay you less than 1 ETH, and then they get paid back 1 ETH. So their fee kind of gets extracted that way.
Okay. So it is kind of on the destination chain because they're paying you less and they're sort of taking it there, I guess. I don't know why I'm stuck on. I'm just really curious. But while I wrote it out, I was like, where's the fee? So now I need to figure this out.
You have 1 unit on A and you get 0.99 units on B, you the user.
Yeah.
And then the solver gets back, depending on where they wanted to get repaid,
I see.
they get
Yeah, they
paid
get to
back
choose.
1 unit wherever, right? So,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay. Question answered. Thank you for that. I'm sorry for being so pedantic, but the last one that I definitely want to cover, I think you wanted to cover this too, Tarun, is the comparisons, because there's a lot of bridges out there. And actually, Hart, I don't know if you know this, but the reason I reached out to you is I had a friend who was he was using a lot of different bridges, and he cited Across as like the one that he really liked to use, and it was the one that was sort of gaining steam. People were kind of noticing that this one worked really well.
Well,
but
that's nice.
There have been a lot of bridges out there. There are a lot of bridges out there. I feel like I've had a bunch of, I think I might have even done a series at some point about bridges, like in 2022 or something.
Well, a lot of the people who are working on bridges don't work on bridges anymore.
True.
Who you had.
True.
Let's be real.
Let's be real. Yeah, that's true. But let's talk about the existing bridges. Like, we don't have to go do the history of all of them. But
We'll keep this short to not like lose all your listeners, right? But first off, let's talk about how bridging's not a thing anymore, or like shouldn't be a thing.
Okay.
And we'll keep this short. So in my example of like what I called Gen 1 bridging at the beginning of the episode, that's like I send a message. And a lot of those bridges were also what I'll call like lock and mint or mint and burn bridges, where they create a synthetic representation of the asset on some other chain. I hate that structure, because in that structure you have perpetual forever risk to the underlying like bridge protocol, right? You, the user, when you have a wrapped representation of that token, you like at any point, if that bridge gets hacked, you lose your assets.
And the wormhole hack in particular was about a malicious operator figuring out how to control the mint function.
Wow.
And then they just minted a ton themselves and then traded for real assets, right? So.
And maybe this gets solved in the far future when we have like really good ZK proofs. Like, this is the Zero Knowledge podcast. Maybe we can really securely prove these minting and bridging functions, but it just scares the shit out of me.
Okay.
Right? And so Layer 0 has their OFT standard, which is effectively this. Wormhole has their version. Axelar has their version. On Twitter, I'm known for picking on Layer 0, but I actually don't like any version of this standard because I think this like rapid mint thing is just scary. But anyways, that's like this kind of message-based like lock and mint token standard. Delete those. Those are things that I don't think are ideal. The Hyperlane is a message bridge, right? That is intelligently designed, that also has a rapid mint and like a OFT-like standard. They call them warp routes or warp tokens too. And I think their code is pretty good, but if you do have a wrapped version of the token, you have perpetual risk to the underlying security of that bridge, which I don't like. But Hyperlane as a messaging protocol, I do like a lot, and I think they're quite great. Axelar, again, they're not a token bridge, they're a messaging bridge, but they have a token like Rapid Mint Standard. Yeah, could keep going there. In terms of token bridges, Stargate is a bridge that actually blurs these concepts too. But
where is that?
That's layer 0.
Layer 0 has so they're big. They use this send message to release tokens from a pool on the destination chain. And I mean, I war with them a lot on Twitter. So anyone listening to this will be like, okay, Hart's warring with Stargate on Twitter. But
okay.
I think their architecture is inferior in the sense that you have a minimum 40-second. You have to wait for a sense of finality on the origin chain and send a message every time to do a bridge transaction, which I think is inefficient and slow compared to this intent-based framework.
What is your take on IBC?
IBC, I think, is great within like Tendermint chains and Cosmos chains.
Okay.
Right. IBC has always been explained to me as it's not specific to Cosmos, but I feel like the actual integrations for everything outside of Cosmos just haven't worked very well. Tarun, you probably understand this better.
I guess like other people who've weirdly spent a lot of time implementing IBCs, like Avalanche, the subnets actually communication protocol is IBC, and there've been all these people who've tried to do it between rollups, but it's just so expensive to have a light client. I think like without modifying and like having extra precompiles and stuff to like make it gas efficient to have a light client in Ethereum chains, it's kind of dead on arrival in Ethereum. You otherwise, or you're just like stuffing it into your client and making it, and so it never becomes standardized. So I think it's very hard to get adopted as a standard unless you're starting fresh. That's kind of where I.
Yeah. So I'm like maximally bullish on this intent-based framework, right?
Well, how do you compare to other intent-based frameworks?
So, okay, let's talk about this for a second too. And you also have like good views on this. So intents can mean a bunch of things. Some people like hyper generalize this and they think of intents as like
anything I want and I get something.
Exactly. I'm going to describe in natural language that I want Uber Eats sushi delivered at 5 p.m. at my house. And this is like,
and please pay using my USDT on Tron and figure out how to convert it to whatever the pizza place takes.
Exactly. Right. So like, okay, I actually think some of this is kind of cool, but like not now type thing.
Look, everyone, you know, people love making that we were promised flying cars, but we got X meme. But like, honestly, this shit is flying cars though, because it's like, hey, you're asking for like everything.
You want like an AI to interpret your natural language request and then find out a way to have competition for it. Exactly. So when I say intents, I'm specifically referring to cross-chain intents in a much more constrained way. And it's really simple. I like my mental model is it's an order ticket. Your order ticket says, I have asset X on chain A and I want asset Y on chain B. I'll pay this much for it.
Do you give it time?
Yeah, sure. I want it by this time.
Okay.
And I maybe want you to also execute this arbitrary code on the destination chain. That's it. So it's like heavily constrained from this generalized intent.
Wait. But execute arbitrary code does not exactly constrain, buddy.
But it's like buy an NFT or like deposit an Aave or something like that.
Some, but like you have some computationally bounded code.
Arbitrary code.
It's bounded in more ways than just computation too. Like there's another example, like I can't send governance parameters that might be worth $1 billion, right? I could like send $1 bridge transaction with like the code to execute the governance. That doesn't work, right? So there are constraints here on what you can do, but I'm basically saying from the perspective of I'm sending money to like buy something or deposit it somewhere, you can do that. So anyways, the intent thing, True, what other intent frameworks do you want to compare it to?
Well, we can start with Anoma, I guess. They invented the word. And then we can kind of go downwards through everything from CowSwap through...
CowSwap invented it, didn't they? They invented
Anoma used the word intent first, though. Like the Anoma blog is, that is the...
It was the what is it called?
Vyvern? Oh, no, not Vyvern.
Wyvern?
Vyvern, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know I see it spelled, but yeah, it's hard to say.
So maybe I should say cross-chain intense every time I say intense, but I don't know.
I think it is a kind of word that just got like, in the same way that like roll-ups, there's always a new adjective in front of roll-up. There's like X roll-ups, and the lexical complexity is just growing over time. There's like a million new fucking words for things that may not be that different. I kind of feel the same thing with intense, except they're hugely different in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm saying cross-chain intent from this like bridge or swap or call. Those are like what I'm kind of constraining it to. And I think there's other protocols in that sphere. So like, I don't think that's a NOMA.
What do you think about Uniswap X? Because it's close to that, right?
It's very close to that, but like we worked with them to write this standard for 7683. I mean, long story short, I thought Uniswap X was going to like eat our lunch when they announced at ETHCC a year ago, they announced cross-chain Uniswap X, and the cross-chain version hasn't shipped yet, but they've actually figured out that there's useful ways to work with us, which we've been working really closely with them on developing a standard, because we realize that the best thing for all of us is having a deep and liquid solver network. And our solver network, we want to be the same. And there's more I can talk about here too, where
it's a great time to move into talking about HCC, because we just spoke on a panel about where the audience was all solvers. So how deep is the solver network at HCC?
Well, so before we do that, why don't we have a bottle here that we've been eyeing and waiting to pop.
By the way, this is
so why don't we actually pop it?
Yes.
And we can keep talking about intense, actually, because I think it was a topic of this week.
This is
let's do it while we drink.
This is now the third annual Anna and Tarun drink and record a podcast episode, always recorded in Europe, apparently.
Oh, wait, I think there was another one, wasn't there?
There was one with Zaki and Uma.
That was last year.
Then there was Dev Connect with Guillermo.
That
one was drank too. We drank way
tequila.
too much.
That was
gross.
Too much. Yeah.
Wait, really? You guys drank a bottle of tequila?
He brought a bottle of tequila, and it was like,
Brendan was there too.
Oh my god, my head hurts so much because I don't like, that is one liquor I try to avoid. But Guillermo was so enthusiastic.
Yeah. Since then we know better, and we stick to bubbly, and it's fine, and it doesn't hurt us too badly. So yeah, you guys keep talking intense. I'm gonna pop the bottle. The audience might hear it, but
do we record it?
I'm gonna try. I'll put the mic near it, but you guys keep going.
So where were we?
Uniswap standard.
Yeah, the standard. So we worked with Uniswap on this. I actually think Cross and Uniswap X are complementary, since Uniswap X is focused on swapping. Whoa! I hope that got recorded. That sounded great.
I see a pop. It seems to have worked. All right.
So Uniswap X is focused on swapping. Cross-chain version is focused on swapping. We're focused mainly on same asset bridging. And I think there's a sort of speed. Are you optimizing for speed versus optimizing for price? And sorry, there's a small debate between little cups or big cups. Yeah. And the little cups won. So yeah, I think that the intent intent-based bridging protocols like us, I mean, they're all pretty complementary. It's like one of those things where I want to push for a standard because the solver network, like, okay, Anna, what we didn't touch on is like, what is the biggest critique of this architecture? And the biggest critique, maybe Tarun slightly mentioned it earlier, it's just, what if no solvers show up?
Oh.
That's the biggest critique.
Actually, I did have this question I forgot to ask, which is like, how many solvers are there?
Yeah.
So how many solvers are there?
We have about 15 to 20 solvers in our network.
Okay.
And we have 7 or 8 of them that are like very meaningful, and there's no one dominant one.
That's good, but it does mean that's a number of people that could maybe stop solving too.
Do you remember when layer ones would always fight about like, we're a blockchain, but our blockchain favors safety over liveness, or our blockchain favors liveness over safety. And it's kind of the marketing speak was one or the other, but really it was like something in the middle. You could think of intense as being favoring safety over liveness. Like, it can lose liveness if all the solvers show up, but you're never losing funds, right? There was nothing minted or burnt, or you can remove from the escrow contract after a certain number of blocks if it wasn't fulfilled, right? But In the other case, the ones like try to give you safety and liveness, they generally have to make some other trade-off. Either there's an intermediary who's running both blockchains, or there's this kind of some control over wrapped assets. And I think like it actually reminds me a lot of L1 design decisions. It's just that in L1s, you really can't tolerate loss of liveness. Whereas here you kind of can, because like, what do? You retry the transaction. It's not like the end of the world in the same way where like if you lose liveness in Solana, it's like, oh shit, everyone got liquidated because the off-chain stuff moved so far.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the other thing I just push on is it's like the liveness properties are pretty good. Like competition is a wonderful thing. And
well, empirical liveness property, not like theoretical.
Correct.
I think that's a key distinction, right? Whereas in layer ones, you actually need the theory and the empirical to be the same, because your threat model relies on the theoretical thing, right? Like of like all the possible attacks, I show that none of the attacks work. But here, I mean, the attack is like everyone suddenly loses the internet at the same time, and it's like unlikely.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Even though it's possible, it's very unlikely compared to like in cryptography or in distributed systems where you need, not only does it need to be basically impossible, but like the likelihood needs to be effectively zero in some very controlled manner. Here, it's not that, but it's like
you
statistically.
feel like it's super unlikely.
Yeah.
But what if it was slower, that like you kind of threw that out there, that solvers just stop solving? Like they just take their money out.
But like this is the thing where it sort of like breaks the entire concept of like a blockchain in the first place. It's like, what if Bitcoin miners just stop showing up, right?
Yeah.
It's like, why do they show up? Well,
Money.
They're economically motivated too.
Yeah.
And so I get slightly frustrated when people push like in weird directions on this. I'm like, no, man, like blockchains work because they incentivize actors for economic reasons to show up.
I'll take one other side of this though, which is like, I wrote this paper on intents, and it sort of was really trying to analyze the Uniswap X style intent, not necessarily this.
And the single chain version.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not sure actually I think our result probably still applies to
I'm not sure that it does, but that's another debate for another time.
But I think it doesn't affect your use case, because your use case doesn't have this idea that like the action that's being taken implicitly changes the price of the fee. So it can go from being uneconomic to economic depending on the actual asset traded, right? If it's just the same asset crossing, you don't have this problem. But the problem that we point out is like, if the solvers are competing, but they're sourcing inventory from somewhere and they all go to the same place, then they all push the price up. Right? If everyone went to Binance at the same time to buy the asset to give fulfill to you, then, well, their profit goes down. In that case, competition's worse. You may want oligopoly and fewer participants. And so the swapping example is much more complicated to reason about than the single same asset.
Okay.
Same assets is like basically hard to get around.
There's something else we're working on that I actually think might solve that we're not ready to talk about, but I'll tell you after the podcast.
Okay.
Whoa, teaser.
Yeah.
Spicy.
Damn.
Do you spill champagne?
I pushed for the small cup and I regret it.
The small cups are too small.
They're
Anna.
too small and I just spilled on myself. All right, thanks,
so the
Tarun.
only last thing I'll say on liveness, and then let's talk about ETHCC. It also gets better over time, or like the liveness guarantees get better over time. Like more volume, more order flow means more solvers in the network, more liquidity in the solver network, and just better guarantees. So I feel very good about the general direction of like that quality. And you also look like our data and our stats and across right now, our 90th percentile fill times are under 10 seconds, which we're pretty proud of. And we're going to push those to under 5 seconds this quarter. And we're doing that because there's enough solvers and we've made the protocol easy enough for them that they show up and do their job because they're economically motivated to.
Nice. Okay, we are at the 1 hour mark.
Whoa.
Recording. I don't know if it'll be that on the final, but I would love to take some time to do part 2 of this episode, which is to talk a little bit about Brussels, the city. Let's not talk about
without
the city.
the sprouts.
Let's not talk about the city. Let's talk about the events and things that we've seen this week so far. We're kind of halfway. Well, Yeah, I don't know how far you are along. Are you almost done, Tarun?
I think tomorrow I view as my last day,
okay, so
and then I'm like,
I'm in the middle still of everything that I'm doing, but this is something we have done every time, right? So we get together. We usually have a guest or two guests we haven't had on before. Hart, you're the guest this time. And you're also a fellow podcaster. We didn't say that early on. You're the star of a popular podcast called...
The star of a popular... Bell Curve?
Yeah.
Well, no, I did a season with my buddy Mike Eppolito. Although we did record another Bell Curve episode yesterday. I'm recording 8 different podcasts this week.
Wow, yeah, I'm doing 9.
But I'm not a professional podcaster.
But you are now.
Yeah.
Hart.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
It's fun. I like it. Tarun is also a professional podcaster.
He's on 2
not
podcasts.
Really. I compared to,
I feel bad. I'm only on
one
1 podcast. You're on many, many podcasts.
Yeah, you know.
Do you remember that time? There was this one year where you were a guest on every podcast.
Yeah.
And I started to get jealous.
That's that's the sign of a bull market. We're back in a bull if you see me on too many podcasts. That should be your like astrological sign of hit the buy button.
Sell button.
Sell.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you should start selling.
Unless you want to be the exit liquidity.
After the end of your tour.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, let's set up the scene though. So, and I said this earlier, but we're here in Brussels, kind of, partway through this week of events, or for some people close to the end. So let's just share with the audience like where we've been, and maybe actually let's start with that. Like, what did you see? What did you actually go do this week? Because I feel like we've all been in slightly different scenes. Like I was in a lot of ZK events. I feel like maybe you were over in the restaking, Tarun. I actually don't know where you were, Hart. DeFi stuff?
Some DeFi stuff, some, yeah.
Okay, why don't we start with you though? Where were you then?
Well, I showed up late, which was great. So I basically got here Tuesday afternoon, rolled off the plane off of a red-eye flight and did my ETHCC talk.
Wow.
Which was great. And apparently I was a clear enough speaker, which I'm impressed with myself by. So yeah, thanks for the support. But
was that like Pat? You just did the Obama giving himself a medal meme, buddy.
I was tired. I got off the plane and I did a really good job. I think.
did it in sarcasm, guys. That's sarcasm. True.
Canadians are too nice for real sarcasm. Note to self.
We're not nice. We're not nice.
I'm less and less Canadian these days, but love my country. We are not the Belgium of France.
No.
You just love that joke so much. Okay, so I rolled off the plane, gave my ECC presentation, had a bunch of meetings, was at Modular Summit today. But I've been I'm kind of annoyingly been more focused on the multi-chain interop type. How do we solve interop things?
Yeah. That's where your head has been at.
That's where my head has been at.
I was at a Risk Zero event on the first day doing a panel. It was kind of state of ZK. I've been very state of ZK, actually, not even before this. ZKV put together, we do this every quarter. I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the show, but we do this state of ZK report once a quarter. And we've been doing it for about a year. It's a great review of everything that's happened. And so the first panel that I did was about that, sort of reviewing it. And then I was on an investor panel. Me.
But you are an investor.
I know, but it was I don't think of myself that way somehow. And I was I found it very funny to be there, to be I'm giving advice. Yeah, it was strange. I was the only angel investor on the panel too, though. So I got to be the one who's
fuck the big guys.
Don't trust VCs.
They're evil.
But yeah, so I would say but still very, very ZK. So yeah, my world was very ZK. What's going on in ZK? I mean, one of the big topics was sort of this emerging, I know it's a bit of a meme, but it's the ZK supply chain. I've had a few episodes kind of leading up to this too that touched on that. This is I think we've always thought of the ZK roll-up, just connecting to the main chain, but what is actually happening in there, and can we break down some of those things and decentralize some of those things? And I think it's still a question mark if we can or should, but I know there's teams that are trying. And so these are things like prover networks, and then the verification aggregators, and maybe there's even going to be more things in there. So that's where my head's been at.
Where has my head been at? The last 6 months have been, I think it's less than 6, like 4 months have been like me kind of being really running into brick walls many times on this like research problem I've been working on for restaking, but I finally think I solved 99% of it. And so I actually gave the same talk twice, and maybe I'm going to give it the same talk thrice tomorrow with this tiny edit, because I think it's one of my favorite talks I've ever written.
And what is this? Is all on restaking?
It's about
you figured it out?
I think I figured out the thing that I think is the most important part of the security model for restaking.
Okay.
So I don't want to take too much time, but I can give a little detour.
No, do it. What's the title? Tarun?
Well, the title of the talk is "How Much Security Does Your AVS Really Need? Lessons from Matching Markets." But
could we spice that up a little?
Yeah, probably. And I basically, okay, I'll just give you the really simple version of the problem and then 2 different versions of solutions. So the problem is, imagine you wanted to attack 2 proof of stake networks simultaneously, say Solana and Ethereum. Well, to do that, let's say I was trying to double spend, and let's suppose I would need to
buy
get
all the security
50%
of both.
right?
Okay.
Separately. Now, in restaking, when I reuse stake, I actually don't have to buy 50% of both. I can buy a smaller threshold and attack both simultaneously. Ooh. So imagine if you could attack Solana and Ethereum at the same time, but you only had to own 20% of Ethereum and 5% of Solana.
But do you get less? Like, would it be like you can attack, but it's somewhat less beneficial? Like, it's not as good a score? Or is it as good a score?
Same profit.
Same attack.
Same profit,
Okay.
same attack. It's just that because you're sharing the stake, this sort of attack, you're able to get economies of scale because you're reusing the same stake, right? So then a natural question you might ask is like, hey, okay, if I can do that, then there should be some kind of like economy of scale-y looking thing that like looks like DeFi, where you might have some notion of a cascade where you can attack a set of services. By you attacking a set of services, you now remove a bunch of stake. That stake allows some other set of services to be attacked, and then those get attacked, and then that allows another set of services. So it's the sort of proof of stake analog of a lending liquidation cascade or a perpetuals liquidation cascade. It's a kind of interesting security model because it's even though it like looks a lot like the DeFi stuff, it's still mathematically very combinatorial, like the proofs of safety and liveness in proof of stake protocol. So it's sort of like somewhere in the middle of the two. And formulating that cascade thing correctly is actually non-trivial. And there's a paper that's still not out. I don't know why it's not out yet, because I think they sent me the original version. I heard about this in like February, and I read the initial version of the paper like 3 or 4 months ago, which is showing that like, hey, you have to be really over collateralized in order to, meaning that the amount of stake people have to stake has to be so much higher than the total sum of all the profits in order for you to be secure these cascades. So what that means is like, imagine I could profit $1 billion from attacking Solana, and I could profit $10 billion from attacking ETH, and I can profit $1 from attacking Cardano. If they were in this restaking world, attacking Cardano, even though I only get $1, to make Cardano secure against restaking attacks, it would have to have $11 billion and $1 of stake, like something proportional to that. So it would have to have something like near the total sum.
Yep.
Right. So it's like insanely over collateralized, right? Very inefficient. But this paper, which sets out really nice definitions, allows you to kind of talk about this cascade stuff. It ignores one thing, which is kind of similar to the type of thing Hart was talking about earlier, which is it ignores the incentives completely. It kind of assumes the adversary who's attacking is arbitrarily powerful. They can get arbitrary amounts of stake across all the networks for free, like cost free. There's no cost of attacking multiple. And the node operators, the stakers, they're sitting ducks. They can't change their stake. They can't be like, oh, I saw something get slashed. I'm going to adjust my stake. So it's kind of this like, you have someone who has like the world's most powerful rifle, and the other side is like handcuffed node operators,
Whoa.
right? It's like a very.
Oh, no. So wait, but did you figure out something
so
here?
So what I did is it took me a long time to figure this out with me and my co-author, that you can weaken if you can weaken the adversary a little bit, and by weaken I mean they face costs for attacking. Like if they try to attack one, well, when they buy the stake to attack one, they actually push up the cost for the next one, right? Because and if they face costs and the node operators are allowed to be smart, they can rebalance in response to slashing events. Then you can bound to this cascade risk, and it doesn't have to be as over collateralized. But you need one important thing, which is you need each service to offer a sufficiently high amount of rewards so that the stakers know where to rebalance. You can think of the rewards as a signal of where you should rebalance, like literal like yield chasing, but that's all they need. So there's kind of a weird sense in which the choice of security model for restaking is actually, even though on the surface you might think you want the exact same thing as proof of stake, if you want the exact same model as proof of stake, you need to be so over collateralized that you might as well have just been n independent networks. Like what?
Crazy.
And so anyway,
cool.
I've been thinking about this for a while.
Amazing. I'm glad you did that though. I'm glad you put that together and that people can now see it.
Yeah. Well,
we did just talk about our own talks. We should also talk about other people's talks or other things.
No.
Only our own talks?
I like Tarun's talk.
Tarun's talk's good.
I'm joking.
But I didn't see that.
You didn't see any other talk. You may not have seen another talk, but I bet you talked to people.
Yeah. No. I actually went to this FHE summit. That was pretty cool.
Oh, interesting.
I saw some interesting like performance numbers and.
Really? See, I have heard through the grapevine that like the performance is still unusable. Like who's doing great numbers?
So I will say,
is it that one company that you invested in?
No. I think what I'm saying is the following. There is a growth rate that people have predicted for performance.
Yeah.
And then there's real performance.
And it has not matched the growth
It
prediction.
has kept up somewhat, but then in some tasks it hasn't. Okay. So it's like it's kind of like a
so
mixed bag.
you can always kind of point to like where it's failing.
Yes.
But there have actually been some advances that are still cool.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I thought that was cool.
That's fair.
The other thing is I feel I've gone to a lot of things where I over time am becoming much more favorable towards teas. I know it's
our audience won't like to hear this.
This is a theme I've heard too.
Yeah.
I know a bunch of people that are like, teas are bad. They're like, yeah, maybe it kind of works. It's okay.
For some things, it seems to work, especially if you combine them with other things like
the
ZKPs
example
and
I
teas.
gave it on the panel that we were on of like slashing rules where like they become a lot simpler when you could do them in FHE or MPC or TE. In that threat model, you don't have to write as much code because the adversary can't read the thing. And it's
Totally.
like there's actually a lot of beauty in the simplicity.
Yeah.
And I think I've come to appreciate that.
Maybe you should say the name of the panel we were just on. We were all on it just now.
Sorry,
actually,
I'm
midway
trying to
through
forget
this.
the name.
It was Information Flow Control Panel. But control panel. Itself sort of stand like it was on the second line. It was kind of confusing. But that was kind of fun. That was one of the things we did. I want to know, like, I think it's hard to not mention us being here, like the vibe generally, because it's different from last year and the year before. Last year, I remember us saying things like, it's sober. But this year, I think it's like more sober. I don't know about you. Do you feel excitement?
There were no big announcements. I will say, I didn't observe any big launches.
There were some ZK announcements, but yeah, they weren't like massive. They were actually projects I didn't know, but they just done something cool. But nothing that would make kind of the mainstream news outside of the ZK space. That's interesting.
In a way, it's almost like the game theory of doing a big announcement at ETHCC is risky because you don't know who else is going to do a big announcement.
And this time, they all didn't.
Right?
Or there were none.
So we need a TE.
So what happens when the solvers all disappear?
Exactly. Well, you need a TE where everybody submits their big announcement and decides who should announce the big announcement.
Oh,
right?
An auction.
Yeah.
Who gets it?
Because,
yeah.
This is the beauty of crypto. Crypto people can be so good at making products only for themselves.
To pick the auction to pick who gets to do the announcement at the next big thing. Do you think people are waiting for DevCon?
I mean, honestly, I'm excited. No offense, the Europe and America kind of suck in crypto land, but every time I go to Asia, it's like, even though sometimes it's like
I hear
crazier.
this. Yeah,
Everyone is like so much more enthusiastic and excited, and like I feel like that does not feel. You know, you're saying it's
Definitely
more
do
sober.
not feel like
I definitely
this
don't
time.
feel like that here.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's Brussels, and I don't, or if it's this
but
year,
it's like even people,
or this
like,
moment.
That's something. No one is like, oh, there's some new exciting. Even ETH Denver felt more exciting because like people were going
What?
crazy about restaking.
ETH Denver felt more. ETH Denver.
Oh, because of restaking.
Because
but
but there was like this huge.
because we're also living through, and this is something that, like I almost put into the state of ZK, but realized it had nothing to do with ZK. But there is this, the last 6 months, there's been like, and it's not really, I don't want to blame the teams doing it because it's kind of not their fault. It's weird timing, whatever, but there's been a very lackluster, saying it nicely, response to launches. I mean, you know this, right? And,
sure.
I'm saying like, it's actually worse than lackluster. It's like
I feel
quite
like it's
painful to
sad
watch.
when like the response to
Free money.
And also like the meme coin stuff. I actually feel like that's made people very cynical. Like this financial nihilism stuff seems to have bled beyond its borders.
I know.
And right now we're in
feel
the
like-
But isn't that
Didn't
fix
you
the
once
hangover.
argue for this? Didn't I feel like last year you were like, the nihilism is good or something, and I was like, no. And now it's taken over.
I think it went too far. Like
Okay.
once we got to the celebrities thing, it's like okay.
But we
this
were
is
there
all-
already, but it's so much sadder this time.
No, it's much worse. Yeah. It's like
and
I don't know.
it's in
I forgot Jason Derulo
politics and-
existed. I really would like to go back to forgetting he existed.
you guys are getting kind of cynical right now?
Yeah. Wait, Hart, are you feeling good?
I feel great.
All right, give
But
us
I
the
think it's-
counter.
Well, the counter, I mean, I showed up here on Tuesday afternoon, like halfway through, which I think makes a big difference because these events are getting too long. Like,
Oh, another thing related to this. There are too many side events.
Yeah,
there are too many, but like,
there were actually too many side events this time.
I think it'll normalize.
We did 2 of them. I am responsible for
You
each.
did 2 of them?
We've
2.
never done an
2
event.
with 2
This is our
different-
first ever event. We did one, and it was like, oh my god, this is
When did you do one?
on Wednesday.
Oh,
I
I
flew
didn't
in.
know.
Gauntlet did
Yeah.
a side
We
event?
both
Yeah,
Hart and I
restaking
did.
research.
We didn't know.
You didn't invite
You didn't
us?
invite me.
Wait, I
Damn.
did. It's public. It was on Twitter.
It's on, dude, I want the personalized invite.
Yeah. Harsh.
And
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
First of all, I came late and I
Canadians.
almost missed my.
We're just passive aggressive bullying you. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
But like, I do agree there are too many side events. The incentive structure there is also kind of messed up, right? Where people want to have their own side event because
Yeah.
it's their thing. And
I think it's the tradition too. Like you're here, you're supposed to, but there was definitely too many.
But like so I feel like a lot of electronic music festivals have the same thing where like one of them gets successful and then people start throwing all these side festivals and then it cannibalizes the main one and then they like because like
how many talks did you go to at ETHCC?
0.
I didn't even go to the event
even go?
Did
actually.
you guys have like a ticket? Did
No,
you go to the event?
I didn't have a ticket.
Yeah.
I just-
So, I mean, that's kind of like the problem, right?
Well, are you supposed to go to the big event? I think DevCon, I'm not actually going to be there, but if I was, I would also probably not spend much time in the main.
I don't know. I feel like everybody should go to some talks sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and I'm kind of full of shit because I didn't actually get to do that because I showed up late. But
People should.
people should.
Yeah.
And like the Modular Summit, I'm going to go to some of the talks
Yeah.
tomorrow and on Saturday. And I did go to a talk.
You can
today.
see my talk tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm only slightly modifying.
Maybe
it.
I should crash that talk too. Or if you're doing a panel, I should just like,
I have a panel which is also like this drinking episode. This is the 3rd annual one.
What
I
is
have a
it?
3rd annual
Oh.
panel of me, Mustafa,
oh no,
and
yeah.
Anatoly
I can't crash that
You're
one.
doing that
Again.
tomorrow.
really?
Yeah.
I wanna
That's
see
actually
that.
kind of cool.
That's at the
yeah.
end of the day, yeah.
You did it last year.
I did last year. I did it the first year, yeah.
Nice.
I'm running out of questions to ask them. Do you guys have any ideas of like
What's happened in the last year? I mean,
meme coins? I mean,
meme
that's the
coins
number one thing I'm going to
for
ask about.
Anatoly comes to ECC?
No, he does it by video.
That makes more sense.
But respect to all the Solana people who came because I feel like it's kind of interesting. Like they are clearly very curious people.
Well, on that, like, what do you guys feel about like the Solana vibe here? Like, how is the
minimal.
Other than
I haven't noticed it.
Kyle and Mert, I didn't talk to anyone who was like
Yeah.
Solana focused.
Kyle's here?
Yeah, he was here. He left yesterday.
Wow.
Or this morning. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah. I didn't see any Solana personally. I didn't.
Do you
see
think it's getting more? It is getting more heated, right?
What?
Solana ETH?
Well, yeah, I guess we didn't talk about the make block times shorter in ETH, and like all the Solana people are like, wow, Ethereum's becoming slow Lana. I was like, that's like a funny. I like had not until I saw that part of Twitter. I was like, whoa.
Slow Lana is pretty good.
I was like, that's crazy.
Do you think there'll actually be a move over though? I feel like the people who are underneath, the real dedicated folks, like I don't think they're going to leave and go there.
But it's a totally
It's
different
the
type of
Ethereum
person.
fair weather friends that'll go there.
But that's not what it's about. It's about like the new people, right? And
Yeah.
it is the war. I like the war. I like the competition. I think it's healthy, right? But the next billion people, where do they build? Or the next billion users, where do they go?
Strange because like where do they? I mean, there are also the sort of like Silicon Valley. What do we call them? Like those teams that are made of ex Meta, ex sort of legacy, easy to invest in projects. Which I wonder if those won't also potentially take. I mean.
Nah.
If you're a corporation, do you want to trust us?
I think
or do you want to trust them?
The most important thing that we've learned from the failures of a lot of layer ones is that the people working on the core protocol can't be dicks. Like
these aren't asked. They're just more like
no. I will say very few have been able to pull off what Ethereum and Solana have, where they have this community that even when there's a galactic
Justin's son, he's a dick.
He's an exception.
Okay, but we'll get to that.
Fine.
We'll get to that. And you have to have a lot of respect for Justin. He's the largest liquidity provider in Ethereum.
Is that true?
He is one of them. Yes.
Wow.
But you know, a way to kind of conceptualize this fight is people in Solana really care about a very different thing. They care about the end user. They don't necessarily care about all these particular theoretical properties that we've held near and dear. And
they haven't nerd sniped the same way Ethereum
but they bond
has.
over that. And they care about the performance stuff. Whereas like you look at the other high performance chains, and even when they do amazing research or they have this like amazing consensus protocol or whatever, right? Like they just don't seem to be able to communicate that to their users. Like their users don't get that. And that community aspect is actually one of the reasons I think Solana was able to get a big developer community, get users who wanted to use it, was they have a leader and developers who are kind of not dicks and not like, oh, we know everything, right? Whereas like, newsflash, I can't really think of that many L1s that don't have founders or CTOs or devs who fall into
know-it-alls.
Or like
is Vitalik a know-it-all? I mean,
no, but
he isn't, but he's not that accessible actually.
No,
but he's a good explainer to technical people.
Wait, who's this?
Vitalik. But when you look at like the Snark blog and stuff like that, like
but he is still a community.
He's involved.
Person, right? In a way that like that's not, you cannot say that for these other L1s. They're like,
for sure.
They're
for
like,
sure.
we're the dev team. You're the user. You know, like it has that
He's
vibe.
in it.
And Solana
humility,
doesn't have like Anatoly is like still literally constantly in all these GitHub threads, like you know, and he's like, you know, he's obviously crazy and then like manic and like tweeting all the time and like. You know, but he's like, he's very focused on even the smallest user, which is crazy, right? A lot of people, they get rich and they tell their users to go fuck themselves. Like that's all Cardano
He doesn't
does.
tell. What was the founder? Who was it who said like, "Do you know who I am?" When somebody said like directed him to customer support.
And then they said, "Yeah, Hoskinson, that's Cardano." That's why I bring.
But like, I think Tarun, it's less about being a dick and more about humility, right? Like,
so aren't those?
I mean, you can be
coin?
a dick and not be humble, but I think you could be.
You can be a humble dick.
But I think that
humble dick is a good name for like a men's underwear brand. By the way, humble dick.
You could be a humble, like not.
Dude, guys, we got to start this men's underwear brand called Humble Dick.
Who's gonna buy that?
I mean, you buy it as a gift.
You buy it as a gag gift. It's like.
Wow,
it's a great gift.
It's got. Sorry, anyway.
But make it happen, people.
I agree with you. There's probably some difference, but like, yeah, the humility and accessibility are.
Vitalik and Anatoly both are humble people, and that's really very, very.
But
cool
it's also
to see.
genuine. They're not like. There's a lot of people who like fake it and then they get caught. And then,
that's not humility. That's not real. That's not humility. That's fake.
But it has to be like sort of authentic humility.
Yeah.
It can't be Obama giving himself a medal.
Oh,
That didn't really happen, Tarun.
I'm kidding.
That's a meme. Poor Obama.
I was just referring to his.
No, I know. Yes.
I know. You're
Pats.
trolling me.
That's what I'm here for.
What else do we want to talk about from this last week? Oh, because actually, I did want to say, I mentioned I was all in the ZK world, and then I was at Modular Summit. But I'm going to be doing 9 interviews this week. We're actually recording. This is a little hint. I hope this comes through, but we got a grant to do the 2nd season of the ZK Whiteboard Sessions, which is a series that we created from like the ZK hack side. And we just recorded the first module of the 2nd season today. So I'm very excited that's going to be coming back. Sorry, didn't mean to be talking about myself. I actually meant to get outside of my own shilling myself.
That's great.
But what I wanted to say was the things that I've been hearing about outside of the ZK world, and especially through these interviews I've been doing, it's actually about interoperability, about bridges, and across kept coming up. That's why it's also very cool and fitting that we just had you on to talk about it.
Such a nice Canadian.
It kept coming up. No, I'm not kidding. It just kept like, there's new bridging, there's new bridge ideas or people who work with bridges, and it's just like mentioned over and over again. So that kind of came up for me.
Simplicity is key in some ways. I feel like that's another thing about bridges is that there was this race at some point where everyone wanted to make their bridge the most complicated, right? They wanted like every bell and whistle
I think
possible.
Wasn't it always kind of to make it the safest? It was like safety
right.
and
But they conflated complexity with safety. Which, sometimes I think that happens in this space. This happens in AI and crypto more than any other space.
Yeah, man, it's so interesting now having been in this space for. You said 2017 was when you got into it.
Yeah.
2018. Yeah, for me it was 2017. I remember having you on the show beginning of 2019, Tarun. That's when I met you. But like you see through this, you see these cycles, and there's this moment in a cycle where you don't know what the outcome will be, but there's like a couple projects that are like pitching you their vision, and you're looking at them and you're like, I don't know how this plays out. But then you get to see it play out. And I think what's a bit unfortunate, I think people forget to look back and think about like what was being pitched then, what were the like 4 bridges, the 4 bridge ideas, and what actually played through. Because in the moment that they're pitching it to you, you're just like, this looks amazing. This seems really cool. But you have to see it, analyze it, and then see what actually happens. Yeah. Do you feel like we just chase narratives a lot? I feel like.
Are you joking? In crypto?
Are we just like.
Anna, can I tell you a little bit about an asset called a meme coin?
But like this is the perverse incentives, right? Where it's like you chase a narrative because you want your token price to go up.
Yeah.
Right.
And you make the narrative sometimes. You like craft a narrative, which is all marketing in the world did that. But I mean, like big concepts in the world have done that.
So like take Celestia, for example. Like they crafted the modular narrative very, very well.
It's so well. It's so nicely done.
It's so well done. It's like a work of art, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
it's spread.
They backed it up with a great product, I think. Or like they built real tech too. And so like to me, that's the dream.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
There's
I think that
way too long a pause right there.
We might cut that.
I think like
it's too much gravitas.
I just sort of think the narratives oftentimes just run at a faster speed than reality, right? And that's in and of itself, that's not the worst thing. But I do feel like in crypto, it's like we're still a space that needs to prove itself to like 98% of the populace, right? Like it's not like AI in that sense where like you don't need to prove to the average person that there could be something there. I still feel like we still have that issue outside of, using stable coins in Turkey. That's the only thing I could probably conceivably tell my grandmother. I do think,
I mean, last year, I think it started to dawn on me, the AI, we got really excited, Tarun, you and I on the show. And I mean, you were into it before, but like, what was it? 2023 was when Kobe modded my voice and created zkpod.ai, and I got like really freaked out. And last year I was really like, I think what we're building, and I don't know if it was crypto, but it was something like maybe immutable ledger plus ZK or something. Like it feels like the human, it's like this creation out of the human mind and the human populace, just the fact that there's so many people that have to be involved, this is the crowd in a way, that it would somehow stand as like a guard against the AI, AGI kind of world. But I don't know, like lately, I feel, especially with the mood and the focus of a lot of what people are, the focus of the industry, that I'm like, are we going to be able to be like the human counterpart? Or the human, I say like counter, actually, like thing that keeps it kind of in check, or like you could actually control it somehow through this like mass hive, like what do we call it? Like just participation?
Yeah, I think an example of where crypto, like the incentives seem to be kind of poorly made in regards to this is like there's 5 million AI tokens that are about decentralized training and like stuff that's computationally basically infeasible, not very useful to most people. Most people are going to take a mega model and maybe fine tune it a little bit, but like it's not a real thing. But yet there's like 1 million of these protocols for doing this, and they all have tokens with market caps. Yet, you know what would actually be a much more useful AI in crypto thing is just making it so I can use intents while with natural language. Like I don't want to fucking.
But that's incorporating AI into it
For sure, but that's more honest. The other thing is like computationally useless. Like anytime I talk to my friends who work in AI, they just like laugh at me when I explain to them these crypto things. They're like, "Why are you people such clowns?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I agree. It's true."
Aww.
But I do agree with Tarun. It's like, what is the crypto XAI kind of?
Yeah.
What is the actual point of it?
Making it easier for users. That's what it should be, right? Like to me, that's what it seems like it should
But
be.
I feel like we're trying to use AI to make crypto easy. But shouldn't
that seems like a way higher value than the other thing.
So
I was talking about like using like all of this stuff as like a counter to.
You mean WorldCoin style?
I think the way you're supposed to.
Don't say that one.
But go back. So we want to make use AI to make crypto easier. That was Tarun's point.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. That actually does make sense.
Sure.
It's just not a business. The problem is that's like so
but
no
that's
one
still
funds
a
it.
thing. But I was actually saying
flip
use
side-
everything we're building to keep AI in check. I'm like completely on a doomerist.
Maybe don't make it keep AI in check. Although that's let's like say make AI better.
Yeah, or
like
that.
nobody's come up with anything that uses crypto to make AI better. And I think there could be.
I mean, in the ZK land, there's a few ideas, but yeah.
Their ideas, they seem untractable. They don't seem particularly consumer friendly. And I'm not convinced yet of like the use case. I think the idea of like, hey, could we build stuff that I've thought about a little bit? Could we build a marketplace for AIs using crypto-like technologies that reduces hallucinations type thing? Okay. Like there's stuff like that might be kind of interesting of like, how could you take what AI does and make it more accurate? Maybe crypto could help there, but nobody's really going down that vein yet.
Fair. I feel like we're about to get kicked out of the room we're recording in.
Yes. I keep feeling
We
this
did get kicked out half an hour ago.
We did get warned.
Yeah, that was
It was actually half an hour ago.
I think this is
actually, I think it was like 40,
Also,
50 minutes
we're all
ago.
drinking this bubbly, have drank this bubbly on an empty stomach, clearly,
Yeah.
because it wasn't that much. But
Yeah,
I do feel like we're being kind of silly. So maybe
all right.
it's time to wrap up.
It's time to wrap up.
Post-production will be great.
Post-production will be minimal.
Thank you, Henrik. Thank you, Henrik. I apologize for
Thank you,
your brain
Henrik.
cells.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
you
both.
guys for doing this episode.
Thank you both so much.
It was so fun to get to know Across, too.
Appreciate it, Anna.
First time on, but I hope not last time on.
Yeah, I hope so
And
too.
to our one listener, Guillermo, we're never doing tequila again.
Unless you're here, then maybe. All right. I think I'm supposed to say thank you to the podcast team, right? Rachel, Henrik, Tanya, sometimes Jonas, and to our listeners. Thanks for listening.